whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do without freedom? Will you fight?
Fight against that? No! We will run!
And we will live. Die. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
You ready? Let's go. Yeah. For those of you that want to know what we're all about, it's like this, yo. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15%.
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this Wednesday evening. Tonight I'm going to start off with two clips from Stefan Molyneux over the Bundy Ranch. Then we'll get into some of the issues I see out at the Bundy Ranch and things that went on out there. We might get an update. I think Vince was supposed to be out there. Maybe we will get a call from him. Not sure, not positive. And then there's some other articles and other issues that we will cover tonight. But let's go ahead and start off with these two clips from Stefan Molyneux.
Hi everybody, Stefan Molyneux.
Now, I'm not sure if this audio is actually playing. You'll have to let me know in the chat room. Let me double check before I continue to keep playing this. Give me a second here. Okay. Kinda sucks I have to check my audio every time, but we have been having some issues. And I think a lot of it is kind of due to software problems. So, okay, I'm getting no sound from people in the chat, so give me a second here and I will play it another way. Okay, not sure what that's about. Okay. Here we go. Hopefully this works out right. Okay, no audio, but you can hear me, so we're going to have to do this the hard way. So give me a second. I was kind of actually expecting my audio to work since I restarted everything. It usually does if I do that. Usually when I have problems is when I haven't restarted my computer in a while. I really need to figure this out because it's really starting to drive me up the wall. Every time I go to play clips, nothing comes through. Okay. Okay, it's queuing up, Calm down. And now it should be coming through here in a second.
Hi everybody, it's Stefan Molyneux from Freedom in Radio. Hope you're doing well. Let us dive into the madness of the Bureau of Land Management sending 200 hyper-armed federal agents along with low-flying aircraft, massive cordoned-off areas of desert, helicopters and attack dogs, and taser-armed agents, all for the tortoises. So what is going on in Nevada? Well, a rancher is having his herd of cattle confiscated because there's a 600,000 acre area under BLM control called Gold Butte, which is near the Utah border. Now, Nevada and Utah both have a
Now I know you're hearing a lot of interruption here. I'm not quite sure what that is.
Under the control of the
me.
federal government, making it a little difficult to be a rancher around. Now, the desert in question is currently the habitat of the protected desert tortoise, and the land has been off limits for cattle since 1998. Now, 5 years before that, when grazing was legal, Cliven Bundy stopped paying federal fees for the right to graze there. He said that he didn't have to pay to graze his cattle on these lands because his Mormon ancestors had been working the land there since the 1880s, and that gave him the rights of the land. This is sort of a common law: when you invest labor, when you enclose an area, when you use the land, it becomes yours. So he said, we own the land. He said, not the feds. He said he's willing to pay grazing fees, but only to Clark County, not the Bureau of Land Management. The herd is not only being thinned out, but the ranchers themselves over recent decades have been significantly thinned out. According to Mr. Bundy, years ago I used to have 52 neighboring ranchers. He said, I'm the last man standing. How come? Because the Bureau of Land Management regulated these people off the land and out of business. He really is the last man standing. Now, Nevada is, along with other states, attempting to wrestle some control of their own land back from the federal land ownership. This is a long fight. It goes back to the sagebrush revolution in the 1970s. So, in 1993, the BLM cut the grazing rights of Mr. Ivan Bundy. And he had a herd of thousands of heads of cattle, and they said only 150 heads of cattle are allowed to graze in this area to protect these species of desert tortoise that inhabit the same area of the state. So this 150 head of cattle would be spread out over 158,000 acres of land to which Bundy held the grazing rights. Now this is a tiny, tiny herd of cattle, can't possibly disturb anything in 158,000 acres. And no plants, no animals, no tortoises would be impacted by this. And of course, no rancher can make a living with that amount of cattle. So it's an absurd directive that basically means he can't have cattle. He can't be a rancher around there, so he would join the 52, and there'd be 53 ranchers no longer in the neighborhood. You know, if you're in the government, it's a lot easier to manage land if you don't actually have any people on it. You know, then nobody objects to all the stuff that you're doing. And he doesn't want to give up his family's way of living that has been going on since the 19th century. Now, this sort of thing is going on all over the country in America. It's one of the reasons why the economy is so tough. The entire timber industry of Oregon was destroyed in the late 1980s in order to protect, and I say this in quotes, protect a subspecies of spotted owl. During the Carter administration in the late 1970s, the Tennessee Valley Authority was forced to modify or abandon billions of dollars in projects to protect the snail darter. Recently, this was just last year, desperate and near hysterical farmers in Southern California had to watch their own crops wither and die as the federal government forced the state to just release more than 95,000 acre-feet of fresh water and let it flow to the Pacific Ocean in order to, quote, protect a subspecies of smelt. Now, am I just being snarky putting the word protect in quotes? I am not. The ESA, which is designed to protect the Endangered Species Act, designed to protect these species, has a success rate in actually protecting the species that it tries to protect of a little over 1%. So billions and billions of dollars of economic activity is destroyed, tens of thousands of jobs are destroyed for a success rate of a little over 1%. But that would be the government for you now, wouldn't it? Here's the irony. This is all supposed to be to protect a tortoise, which the government is currently actively destroying and killing. So throughout the housing boom in the 2000s, the Bureau earned enough to fund something called the Desert Tortoise Conservation Center, DTCC. Aren't you glad that you know that now? And this was in southern Las Vegas. So this was a habitat created to house these wild desert tortoises that were removed from the pots of developers, and they were going to breed them and use them to recover the species. And it had an operating budget of about $1 million a year, which is quite a lot for 1,400 tortoises. Now, in the recession, right, the housing crash, the housing recession that followed dwindled the number of developers, and therefore they weren't paying these fines for disturbing habitats. This is a shakedown, really. And so what happened was the DTCC, right, the conservation area run by the government for the tortoises, ended up turning some of them loose into the wild and euthanizing a lot of the others because they said, well, you know, we just don't have enough money to continue, so they're going to close down at the end of the year. From the AP, they say, back at the conservation center, a large refrigerator labeled carcass freezer hummed in the desert sun as scientists examined the facility's 1,400 inhabitants to find those hearty enough to be released into the wild. Officials expect to euthanize more than half the animals in the coming months in preparation for closure at the end of 2014. So it's really important for a few cattle to not disturb the tortoises in 160,000 acres that the government will euthanize 700 to 800 of these critters, even though they're endangered. So this is the kind of madness that you have when you get massive government power involved in complex ecosystem questions. So for more than 2 decades, right, this is what the BLM says. For more than 2 decades, cattle have been grazed illegally on public lands in northeast Clark County. This is a statement released by the BLM. BLM and the National Park Services have made repeated attempts to resolve the matter administratively and judicially. Impoundment of cattle illegally grazing on public lands is an option of last resort. See, this is what the government calls an attempt to resolve the matter administratively and judicially, which is, give us all your cattle, which we will sell to pay the fines we imposed upon you to save a tortoise that we're currently murdering ourselves, or we will shoot your family. This is called a resolution of a dispute on the part of the government. I guess it's the same way that a bully in the schoolyard resolves your dispute over your lunch money by punching you in the face until you hand it over. Oh, look, a resolution. BLM said in a statement the two judges ordered Bundy to remove his cattle from Gold Butte. The Center for Biological Diversity, an environmental group, said the federal action was long overdue. So a spokesman for this Center for Biological Diversity said, despite having no legal right to do so, cattle from Bundy's ranch have continued to graze throughout the Gold Butte area, competing with tortoises for food. What idiot thinks that cows and tortoises compete for food? Hindering the ability of plants to recover from extensive wildfires, trampling rare plants, damaging ancient American Indian cultural sites, and threatening the safety of recreationists. Oh yes, those dangerous cows, just hunting and cornering and ripping apart people who are out for a picnic. And of course, it's really important to know that government and quasi-governmental agencies, after a couple of hundred years of screwing Native Americans 6 ways from Sunday, are now very concerned about land issues and Native American sites. So this is all complete madness, as you can imagine. So the Bundy herd of cattle at last count stood at a little over 1,000. And again, to spread this out over 160,000 acres is not going to disturb any turtles. And in fact, the cows are very helpful to the turtles on two levels. One, of course, they eat a lot of the foliage, and a lot of that, of course, is higher than the turtles can reach. They're kind of low-down kind of creatures, of course. And as a result, it's less of a tinderbox. Like, it is a desert, it's very dry, and one thing that's quite common on government lands is massive and horrifying wildfires, because they don't allow small fires to burn, and also they don't allow grazing animals to strip some of the undergrowth, so that when there is a fire, it's just like a supernova. I mean, you might as well just set off a bomb in the woods, or in the desert. So they're going to thin out the foliage, resulting in fewer fires, and cows, as you may know if you spent any time on a farm, basically empty out all of their four stomachs and produce pretty much, it seems like, more than the weight of a cow every day in cow manure, which is actually very helpful for the tortoises. And tortoises can eat the cacti, the wildflowers, herbs that cattle don't eat, and of course the recycled nutrients of the cows themselves. So it's not exactly an antagonistic ecosystem that they're talking about. The BLM released a statement on its website saying, cattle have been in trespass on public lands in southern Nevada for more than 2 decades. This is unfair to the thousands of other ranchers who graze livestock in compliance with federal laws and regulations throughout the West. The Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service have made repeated efforts to resolve this matter administratively and judicially. So you see, the fact that the government basically just used that Windows Paint program fill feature to go, boink! We own all this land. We own 80% of Utah and Nevada. Boink! It's ours. Why? Stroke of a pen. We don't have to enclose it. We don't have to work it. We don't have to build anything on it. We don't have to plant anything on it. We don't have to graze. We've got the magic marker of public ownership. So we just make it ours. And suddenly, you're trespassing on land that you and your family have worked for 150 years straight. Now, the idea that this guy not wanting to pay artificial fees for unowned land that is merely claimed by a bunch of idiots in Washington, that this is unfair to everyone else, it's like, hey man, if you're not gonna pay the mafia, that is unfair to all of the other shopkeepers in this neighborhood who pay the mafia. You know, madness. So, federal government has shut down a scenic area about half the size of the state of Delaware to round up 900 cattle, it says, are trespassing on government land, which basically means unowned land, a piece of paper, a map, a fill program, and a coercive shakedown. Now, they're killing all of these tortoises because they're closing down this tortoise center, which costs $1 million a year to run. Now they're spending $3 million to round up all these cattle, which would keep these tortoises alive for another couple of years. And again, this is just it's got nothing to do with anything productive. Now, the situation where there's a real tinderbox, right? So you've got all of these hyper-militarized federal agents swarming all over this land. Cliven Bundy's son, Dave Bundy, 37, was arrested recently. Members of the Bundy family had gathered to film and take pictures of the removal of their cattle in an effort to document the event. According to reports, Dave Bundy was taking pictures and recording on his iPad when he was asked by federal employees what he was doing. Reports say that he told the BLM workers that he was exercising his First Amendment rights. See, that's a relief because, those of us who understand the dangerous power of the state keep forgetting that he has a magic shield of words. Right? It's a magic shield called the First Amendment rights, and they try to, they just go up and bump up against, oh wait, that's not how it happens at all. Well, what happened? Well, they released dogs, they threw him to the ground, and they actually, according to reports, was standing on his head. And he had a dozen officers on top of him, as well as dogs, so it was a real throwdown, and just tragic. There's also reports that Bundy's son, Ammon Bundy, was shot with a stun gun by law enforcement officers recently, and that the rancher system was pushed to the ground. But the important thing is that the tortoises that the government are currently killing and that the cattle would only benefit are now safe from the ranchers. There are over 200 militarily armed federal agents using tasers and attack dogs to disperse protesters. Bundy said that the government has also brought everything but tanks and rocket launchers. He said they're carrying the same things a soldier would. Automatic weapons, sniper rifles, top communication, top surveillance equipment, lots of vehicles. It's heavy soldier type equipment. Now I wonder why people who are anti-gun aren't out there saying that the government should disarm, because clearly this is a very dangerous use of gun. Oh wait, that's right. Because being anti-gun is actually only being anti-private citizen gun. It's being very pro-government gun. Because when you disarm the population and arm the living hell out of the government, that just works out wonderfully throughout history, doesn't it? When his wife said that the roughly 200 armed agents from the BLM and FBI are stationed around their land, and when there was filming going on, there was film evidence that snipers were actually training their weapons on the Bundy family when they were filming the agents occurring. So this is a tragic and tinderboxy situation, and one thing that's important is it is encouraging to those of us who are skeptical of the value of state power. It's wonderful to see the degree to which the government is willing to leap into action to protect a tortoise. That's fantastic. Don't you remember in 2008 when the bankster class decimated about 40% of the wealth of Americans by cheating and lying and bribing? How the government leapt into action and pursued criminal charges against these fraudsters for the degree to which they were just ripping money out of the hearts of Americans and their homes. Oh wait, no, that didn't happen at all. Well, I guess both tortoises and the financial industry must have donated a heck of a lot of money to the government. I mean, Barack Obama's basically only in power because he took so much money from the moneyed classes in terms of donations. He was the largest ever recipient of donations from the financial industry. So the government is really bringing the guns down on this rancher, while basically not only not prosecuting any of the banksters involved in the rape of the American economy, but actually funding them to the tune of $700 billion plus as part of the TARP bailout. There's an old statement that says, good fences make good neighbors. Where property rights are clearly delineated, human conflict, particularly aggressive conflict, diminishes enormously. There is no moral, philosophical right to claim that which you do not homestead as property. Like, let's just say you just finished paying off your BMW, and I suddenly say, oh, that BMW is mine, and you now owe me $400 a month in rent, otherwise I'm going to come and take it by force. You'd be like, no, I'm the one who bought and paid for this car. You don't get to just arbitrarily extend your property rights to my property. But this is what individuals within the government claim the right to do, and this is the kind of catastrophes that are going to result. There's nothing sensible about this, because they're saying, look, he didn't pay his fines. But if he did pay his fines, or if he did pay his grazing rights, or his fines, then he would be allowed to go and to let his cattle go here. And if he let his cattle go here, then according to the government, they would step on the tortoises, and it would be tragic. Right? So it's not about the money. It's not because he didn't pay the fines. They say he owes them $1 million. He says he only owes them 300,000 or so. So it doesn't make any sense at all. The government's killing the very tortoises that they claim this whole action is designed to protect. So it's all nonsense. What it is, fundamentally, is political thrill seekers, adrenaline junkies, cortisol junkies, seeking the high that they get from exercising violent power over other human beings. A wide variety of studies have shown that political power is more addictive. Coercive power over your fellow cognitive bipeds is more addictive than cocaine. So this is simply the actions of the political class exercising power over good-natured, productive people, because that's how they get their kicks. It is like asking, why does somebody do cocaine? Because it's thrilling and exciting. Why are they exercising this power? It's a great game of screw you chess. And one of the things that is the most tragic and most illustrative about this entire debacle is the fact that the government has set up these zones. They're called First Amendment zones. And what they're allowing people to do, you see, is they put you in a little pen, little cattle pen, and in that cattle pen you can protest. You can exercise your First Amendment rights to protest. Isn't that nice of them? In other words, if you're going out to protest against the government's arbitrary and destructive treatment of cattle farmers, the government will treat you as livestock, with them as the cattle farmers, put you in a little pen, and give you the right to bleat into the uncaring wind all of your upset at how the government is treating you. So this is where we've come to. The government is openly corralling and herding in citizens who wish to protest the arbitrary and unjust treatment of other citizens by the government. And this is where political freedom has decayed to, as predicted by libertarians, for 6 billion years or so. Certainly over the last 150 years since classical liberalism, it has been predicted that the government will continue to grow until it collapses or there's significant pushback. So these people who are so addicted to political power are going to continue to do this until they crash. There's almost no cure for addiction save the destruction of the source of the addiction. And that means that we have to lovingly take political power away from these addicts for the benefit, really, of humanity as a whole. This is Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio. Thank you so much for listening and watching, as always.
Okay, there's some information on some of what's going on over at the Bunny Ranch. And one thing I want to point out is the argument that Cliven Bundy is making. Now, you hear people like Glenn Beck and others come out and go, well, it's in the state constitution that the feds get this land. It's in the state constitution that the feds get this land. Well, someone that really has studied state constitutions, definitely my own Indiana state constitution, I go, okay, let me go check the state constitution, because, well, if you're claiming constitutionality and that's what you're claiming, well then if the Constitution says that, well, the feds get this land, well then you can't really claim constitutionality. What I found out is a little bit different. It's a little bit more murky. And this feeds right into exactly what Cliven Bundy has been arguing. That the land that the feds claim is theirs through the state constitution is actually kind of based on a fallacy. Because in reality, there's actually no Nevada state constitution. People are like, are you serious? They have it on their website. But if you actually read it, It is for the territory. It is a constitution for the Nevada territory. And this is very important. The territory is a completely different entity than the state. When the territory of Nevada, when it was broken down, okay, this section we are going to make into statehood. We are going to make the state of Nevada. You create a different entity, which would then call for a constitution to be drawn up for the entity of the state of Nevada. And be not really a constitutionalist anymore, but if I'm looking at it from the constitutional perspective, well, then the state never did draw up a state constitution. They just blindly kind of inherited the Nevada one without ever really making a state constitution. Therefore, anything previous and added to that constitution of the territory of Nevada is for an entity that no longer exists. Therefore, the federal claim for that land that is in the Constitution of the territory of Nevada would be, well, there is no territory of Nevada. There is a state. And once it became a state, under the Constitution, it inherited the same constitutional rights as the original 13. So looking at it from the constitutional bounds, everything's been done under the Constitution of the territory of Nevada, or the Nevada territory. He is claiming that, well, that doesn't coincide because, honestly, the state doesn't even have a constitution. Therefore, the feds have not properly inherited this land. They're doing it under false premises. Therefore, looking at it again constitutionally, he goes, now it's up to my state, and especially my county and the county sheriff, to kick the feds out. And people are like, your sheriff won't kick the feds out. Well, being someone that lives here in northern Indiana and having a large Amish community in this area, I want to read you something from 2011. And this is northwest of me is where this took place. But here in Indiana. And this one's coming from freerepublic.com. It was December 21st, 2011. Says here, David Hotstetler doesn't want to be in the limelight. I'd rather just be left alone. Kind of like what Cliven Bundy has been saying. He just wants to be left alone. And people are like, well, why are you bringing up this Amish and what does this have to do with it? And it has to do with regulations and policies. These, you gotta remember, they're not out there in Nevada enforcing laws. There are no laws that they are out there enforcing. What they are enforcing is regulations and policies. And this is how they claim authority because, again, BLM is not law enforcement. Period. They do not have law enforcement authority. They are not law enforcement. They are a bureaucratic agency. Well, then how are they out there? Under the guise of enforcing regulations and policies. Which, that in itself, if you're looking at it from a constitutional standpoint, then yeah. Let me get into this. It says, as a producer of raw milk, and yes, this was a raw milk incident up here in Indiana. Hochstetler, operator of Forest Grove Dairy south of Middlebury, finds himself at the center of controversy. He's faced repeated inspections by federal regulators, apparently, and his situation prompted Elkhart County Sheriff Brad Rogers to intervene, advising the feds to watch their step or face arrest by his department. Yes, the sheriff, Brad Rogers, told the feds that he would arrest them. Better watch your step or you will be arrested, is basically what he told them. And it says here, with Mr. Hochstetler, he's had harassment and ongoing visits that were unreasonable, said Rogers, who told federal officials in a December 2nd email that they would need warrants before conducting any more inspections of the man's farm. I just told them that they no longer are welcome unless they had a warrant. Now, judging the response to his actions in the blogosphere, Rogers is the toast of online raw milk activists and others who think the federal government oversteps its bounds. Can you see that maybe this has been brewing for a little bit? Just a little bit. Just, in the hearts of Americans that think that the government has been overstepping with their regulatory and policy enforcement around the nation. It says, quote, I think it's great that the local sheriff is supporting the local farmers, said Gary Cox of the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit group active in defending access to raw milk. Hochstetler is left unsure what happens going forward. Federal officials backed off now. I don't know how long, he said. While federal authorities remain largely mum, as much as I would like to give a reaction, I would not, said U.S. Department of Justice Attorney Ross Goldstein, recipient of the email from Rogers. More than just raw milk, the roots of the controversy stem in part from differing views about raw milk, that it's unpasteurized milk, and that the role of government should have in regulating its trade and use. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration says unequivocally that raw milk is not safe to drink because of bacteria it can contain. Federal law prohibits commercial transfer of raw milk across state lines, while under Indiana law it's illegal to sell the product. The producers come up with arrangements under which consumers own or lease milk producing cows, allowing them to access raw milk. That's one way that around here people have got away with getting raw milk, is that they buy lease into the milk producing cows. And I want to address that the Food and Drug Administration, I've went over this before, but the Food and Drug Administration saying that raw milk is not safe because it can contain bacteria. Yes, it can. A lot of the good bacteria that help your body, it contains. Could it contain bad bacteria? Yes, if the cows are not kept in a healthy environment, kind of like, the whole pasteurization of milk kind of got started. Does anybody here know, where that whole pasteurization of milk got started? Out in New York, when they had cows in alleys in between buildings, sleeping, pissing, and shitting on concrete and bricks, and not able to get out of the stuff, completely filthy, and contaminated milk. When you'd go milk your cows, you were standing and milking these cows with feces underneath you. So yeah, I could see how the bad bacteria got in that milk. And that's where the outbreak really started out, was in the middle of New York. Therefore, they come up with pasteurization. It will kill all the bacteria. It kills all the enzymes too. It kills everything good in milk, along with everything bad in milk. Lactose is a living thing. Lactose is killed by pasteurization. Hence why a lot of people claim that that's also what leads some people to be lactose intolerant. I've met a few people that they are lactose intolerant, except when it comes to raw milk. They could drink raw milk, but pasteurized milk they can't. But this right here shows that, well, yeah, your county sheriff can tell regulatory people to get out. And in this case, he said come back with the warrant, which they never did. But even with the warrant, there was something which, there was a case that Sheriff Mack was involved in. Now, whether you like Sheriff Mack, and I have some, reservations about him myself, this court case, during the Brady bill really did kind of, bring something out for sheriffs and state and local, peace officers and sheriffs, really should take to heart that it really, embedded that state and local authorities are not required to enforce or be a part of any federal court orders. What this means is if a sheriff or local state governments say that, well, you need to enforce this, and those state and local and sheriff go, no, I believe that to be unconstitutional, they do not have to enforce it. And because the sheriff is the final say in those counties, he also has the right to tell those federal agents that are not law enforcement, they are regulation and policy enforcement, but the sheriff is elected law enforcement, can tell them to get out of the county. This is where it all circles back to Cliven Bundy and his argument. The so-called state constitution is not the state constitution. It is the constitution of the territory of Nevada, which no longer exists and is a separate entity. Therefore, what it contained in it that gives the feds ownership of land is null and void, because once they became a state, they received the same constitutional rights as the original 13. And that his county sheriff is the one that should be stopping federal agents. Because, again, he has not broken a law. He has went against regulatory policy. And there's big difference there. Now, I'm sure Harry Reid doesn't want, well, we can't have people breaking the law. What law did he break? What law did he break? Trespassing? Can't trespass on public land. That's another fallacy that too many of us live by because of cognitive dissonance. But, he didn't break a law. He broke regulations and policies that the state is not required to enforce. And the sheriff has the ability to say, no, you're not going to enforce regulations and policies within my county because they are not law. They have not went through any congressional debate or anything. It's not signed into law. It's a regulatory thing. And the sheriff has the ability to say, you're not going to enforce regulatory policies within my county when it hurts the ability for these people to make a living. Okay. Now, give me a second here. Because I do have one more. This one's only about an 8-minute clip. Nevada rancher standoff, government corruption exposed. So go ahead and play this.
Hey everybody, it's Stefan Molyneux from Freedom Main Radio. I hope you're doing well. So, Cliven Bundy is not going to be shot, at least not today. His family remains unsnipered, which I guess we can consider good news. Congratulations to him and to his family and to InfoWars, who broke the story that probably broke the back of the federal assault on the rancher's property. But first, a few thoughts. So, what was the story from the Bureau of Land Management? Why, oh why, did they want these cows off the desert? Well, because it was all about the tortoises. You see, the federal government cares so much about the tortoise. In fact, they care so much about the tortoise that over the past several decades, they have literally detonated hundreds of nuclear bombs in Nevada. Now, it's okay. You may be concerned about the tortoises, but remember, it's true that they have faced hundreds of nuclear bombs detonating in their habitat, but it's okay, you see, because they have shells. And as far as I understand it, I'm no biologist, neither am I a militarist, but if you have a tortoise shell, you can't possibly get vaporized. So I'm sure that they're completely fine. So I think that's important. It's also important to understand, for those who don't know why Americans want guns, or at least patriotic Americans want guns, this would be an example of why Americans want guns. The Bureau of Land Management did not want an obvious mob-style execution of a recalcitrant farmer spattered all over the internet. Lord knows you're not going to find much truth in the mainstream media, but places like this, places like InfoWars, places like Drudge.com, Drudge Report, are definitely giving you the information that you need to make an informed decision about the mafia-style takedown that was happening out there in the Nevada desert. So this is why people want guns. It's to resist the criminal encroachment of governments. If you can imagine, should Cliven Bundy be a British citizen, it would be like, let's have a revolution against the Queen. Oh, they have guns? All right, revolution is off. Let's have them in for some tea and kiss their booties. That's sort of how it would go down in England. So this is not how it goes down in America, and this is why people want guns. A listener emailed me with an interesting observation that I'd like to share with you. So about 1,000 people came out to support Cliven Bundy in his stand against the Bureau of Land Management. And he pointed out no minorities, right? No blacks, no Hispanics, no Asians. Couldn't really seem to find any brothers and sisters in our multicultural mosaic who were out there willing to defend a man's property against violent incursion.
Now I'd like to step in and say I think it was Wayne Dupree was actually out there. So yeah, he's black. So just to point that out.
From the federal government. I think that's interesting. So from people from other cultures, say, or other countries who want to come to America and partake of the freedoms, you might actually want to occasionally stand up and ride out to defend those freedoms. That might be something worthwhile. I invite everyone to join in the salad of resistance that appeared to be going on. So the BLM has backed off and has decided to return to the soft coercion of the court system rather than the hard coercion of laser sights to the forehead. One of the main reasons for this, I think, has to do with the InfoWars story that was broken a day or two ago, was repeated on the Drudge Report, and became the most popular news story over the last day or so. And it is the relationship between Senator Harry Reid, or as he's known, Dirty Harry, and his role behind the Bureau of Land Management and the land grab of the Bundy Ranch. So, the Bureau of Land Management, whose director was Senator Harry Reid's former senior advisor, has purged documents from its website stating that the agency wants Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy's cattle off the land his family has worked for over 140 years in order to make way for solar panel power stations. Ooh, bad enough? Oh, let me tell you, it gets better. It's a communist dictatorship-funded solar power station. That's just great. So the BLM had these documents available to anyone who wanted to search, i.e. anyone who wasn't in the mainstream media, currently sucking from the propaganda tit of the federal government. They were all available. They were repeated by InfoWars, and then some insane idiot on BLM deleted them from the website, because you know when you delete something from the internet, it's just gone forever, including from people's memories. So the document, which I'll put the link to below, is entitled Cattle Trespass Impacts, and it directly states that Bundy's cattle impacts solar development, more specifically the construction of utility-scale solar power generation facilities on what are euphemistically called public lands, which means lands which you can profit from but don't have to have the responsibility of actually building anything on. Another BLM report entitled Regional Mitigation Strategy for the Dry Lake Solar Energy Zone reveals that Bundy's land in question is within the Dry Lake Solar Energy Zone and surrounding area, which is part of a broad U.S. Department of Energy program for solar energy development in 6 southwestern states on land managed by BLM. So back in 2012, the New American reported that Harry Reid's son, Rory Reid, was the chief representative for a Chinese energy firm planning to build a $5 billion solar plant on public land in Lachlan, Nevada. Well, Rory Reid, who is a lawyer in Las Vegas, is the son of Harry Reid, who used to be the chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission. Now, the Nevada Gaming Commission is not highly known for its transparency and lack of corruption. It's kind of known for being kind of mob-infested and incredibly corrupt. So at least he learned at the feet of Emperor Palpatine when it comes to government corruption. According to journalist Marcus Stern with Reuters, he reported that Senator Reid was also heavily involved in the deal as well. Reid and his eldest son Rory are both involved in an effort by a Chinese energy giant ENN Energy Group to build a $5 billion solar farm and panel manufacturing plant in the southern Nevada desert. Reid has been one of the project's most prominent advocates, helping recruit the company during a 2011 trip to China and applying his political muscle on behalf of the project in Nevada. His son, a lawyer with a prominent Las Vegas firm that is representing ENN, helped it locate a 9,000-acre desert site that it is buying well below appraised market value from Clark County, where Rory Reid formerly chaired the county commission. Oh, the gruesome, evil webs of nastiness that is inbred government corruption. It's like a gene pool from northern Tennessee. And, of course, people in the mainstream media have completely ignored this. It's wonderful that we have resources like InfoWars and the Drudge Report to get the information to us that we need to recognize just how little they care about tortoises and how much they love the Benjamins. Follow the money. Cui bono is a good way to start to understand these things. So they did accuse the cattle of trespassing, and that is true. Cattle have almost no respect for property rights. They also have terrible table managers. I mean, if you see half a cow herd sit down with Ann Landers, she turns pale. They eat with their hooves. They fart at the table. Absolutely wretched. So it's great that they're being charged with trespassing and punished therein. Reid is accused, writes journalist Dana Loach, Reid is accused of using the new BLM chief as a puppet to control Nevada land, already 84% of which is owned by the federal government, and pay back special interests. BLM has proven that they're a situational concern for the desert tortoise. That they have a situational concern for the desert tortoise, as they've had no problem waiving their rules concerning wind and solar power development. Clearly, these developments have vastly affected a tortoise habitat more than a century-old quasi-homesteading grazing area. If only Cliven Bundy, she writes, were a big Reid donator. So there you have it, folks. The standoff is at an end because they're armed, they are resolute, and because the giant tentacle evils of the money, life, and soul-sucking federal government have been exposed for all to see, and so they have to retreat back into their lair and plot a softer takeover using the gentle fascism of the U.S. court system. So I hope this is helpful. This is Stefan Molyneux from Freedom Main Radio. Thank you so much for watching.
Now, you know, over the social media, I've seen a lot of statists come out. He's not paying his grazing fee. Other ranchers have to pay their grazing fee. And these are people that call themselves, you know, lovers of liberty, libertarian, constitutionalist, and the simple fact that, well, you're saying that it's legitimate for someone using force to come in and say, pay me, for them to turn around and then regulate to you how to ranch or how to use the land. And then these same people go, well, they've had this ability, that the government, you know, and they've had this ability to do this in BLM. Well, under what authority? And people mainly will go back to, but, a lot of people will go back to the forming, I forget what it was called before the BLM, but basically how it all came to be, and the broad language of it puts it in a place that says, well, the BLM and these federal regulatory agencies within the government to manage land within the U.S., the broad language actually is written where it can be interpreted that no matter if it's public or private land, your private land, public land, they have authority over all of it. This is the same thing that they're using to push Agenda 21. Here locally, some people I've done work for, they had bought property. The county neglected a creek bed. So the creek bed was clogged up with branches, and which caused it to really dam up. The county didn't come out and do anything. And the water started, you know, overflowing the creek and kind of made some of their land sink. So they go, well, there's a construction going on and they're removing some dirt. Maybe they can bring some of that dirt over to my property and bring my property level back up, because it's kind of starting to sink because the county has neglected this creek bed that overflows and acts more like a swamp. Well, under these same regulatory agencies, pushing Agenda 21 actually came in and started fighting this couple, this grandfather and grandmother, father and mother, older couple, trying to, you know, just live. Came in and started fining them daily, thousands of dollars, and started fining the construction company that dumped the dirt for them daily, thousands of dollars. So now they're getting thousands of dollars off of two people going, it's a wetland. It's a wetland. Because some world organization goes, hey, it's a wetland. And, well, the federal agency says, well, we basically got this broad language that says, well, we can control all land in the U.S., not just public lands. So if you think this is just a public lands thing, you're fooling yourself. completely fooling yourself. Because this is crap I've been watching happen locally. Under the same crap regulations and policies that many in the U.S. claim illegitimate. And a lot of these people that claim that they're for liberty, that they're for freedom, are going, well, he needs to pay his grazing fees because those are public lands. Lands that his family has managed. Not the BLM. The BLM has not managed this property. His family has managed that property for hundreds of years. The BLM has passed regulations and charged him. Passed more regulations and charged him. And in the meantime, did absolutely nothing to manage that land other than to manage to run ranchers out of that county. Now, the solar farm thing, people are like, no, that solar farm thing, that was miles off. That wasn't on this land. No, what they actually have already done is not on this land. But they have done exploratory drilling for gas, for oil in this area. They have done solar testing in this area. When you do all that in this area and then try to run, which the documents basically from the BLM that they took off their website but are still on the Google cache, basically say, well, for us to be able to get a hold of these resources, first you have to run these ranchers off of this public land to remove these cattle from this public land. And that's how they get their grant money. For them to get their grant money, they had to agree to that. And I'm telling you, I've sat down and read so much crap on this. And this is another thing. There was a lot of misinformation going out. And I've seen a lot of hyping up trying to make this into a revolution, into a civil war. If it turns out to be something like that, it is what it is. But what I'm seeing is people falsely making accusations, trying to stir crap up, which is why I hold a lot of reserve when it comes to a lot of these people out there that are trying to cover it. I've seen a couple of reports from some people out there with the Bundys that the Bundys want to, dispel these rumors that, they're under attack. And, we've seen so much crap. Oh, they're under attack right now. They just want to get back to their ranching. They're saying, hey, they did back off. We have our cows. We want a ranch. Nothing's going on right now. That's basically where that's landed. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of people out there making claims and not doing their homework. And at the beginning, I was in support, and then issues were brought up. And I'm going, well, if I'm going to talk about this, I really need to look into these issues. And, for a while I was still on the fence. And from a libertarian viewpoint, from someone that, doesn't believe in, these victimless crimes being, strong-armed by the government, this guy's raising, beef for you to eat, which beef prices are already up 18%. And they're supposed to go up another, 13%? where the hell was I seeing that? Something like 13%. It's just amazing. I see so much hypocritical crap out here. And the simple fact is, this is a bureaucratic entity pushing regulations and fees onto a citizen. And this is not to say that the Bundy Ranch is somehow more important than your daily life when you are paying an income tax to a federal government that does jack for you. That should just be as important. A lot of people just don't look at it that way. You know, I guess I'm more of a, you know, libertarian anarchist type person. I'm a volunteerist. I do see government as illegitimate, and it's a outdated concept. And for people that say that they love freedom, that they love liberty, to sit there and claim, well, he didn't pay his grazing fees. And then wonder why maybe other people might not be willing to stick up for you. There's something wrong with the hypocriticalness of people that claim to love liberty. And I'm not, you know, trying to, you know, go after any certain person. It's just something that's really been bugging me. I think if you claim to believe in liberty and freedom, that you really need to get a stronger grasp on what liberty and freedom mean. Didn't pay his grazing fee to a regulatory entity that is going to force him from 900 cattle down to 150 and think he's going to be able to survive. Well, no, but, well, maybe if he can't survive on 150 cattle on his ranch, he should just sell his property that's been in his family for hundreds of years and has allowed his family to eat and feed themselves and put a roof over their head. So when you have to be ran into an apartment complex and kicked out of your house because they push too much regulation on you that you can't afford to live in a house anymore doing the exact same thing that you might have done for years and your dad did before and your grandfather did before. Do you think anybody's going to stand up for you when you go, oh, he didn't pay his grazing fees? How many fees do we have to pay before you say we're done? Look at what the founding fathers did. It would have never got this far. It would have never got this far if we had the mentality of our founding fathers. We are weak as a society. Because so many people, including, you know, some of these people that claim to be, you know, alternative, but they're more mainstream, I'm not saying any names, to sit here and chant for freedom and liberty and all this and then turn around and go, you know, he didn't pay his grazing fees. And to cower when it comes to actually confronting something. That's the problem. Divide and conquer. It's working. I'm for liberty, but he didn't pay his grazing fees for, he can't be free. Even though he's not hurting one person. Cows and tortoises have been living side by side for hundreds of years. Oh, and before cows were there, guess what? There were buffalo there. Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about the herds of buffalo. And yes, buffalo did make it into Nevada. I did double check that. I was like, that's kind of desert. I was like, is there any signs of buffalo? Not a lot, but yeah, there were buffalo. That was like their most, I think southern, other than if, you go east a little bit. But, yeah, we just, we wiped them out and brought in cows, and they've been living there for hundreds of years, but now all of a sudden it's a problem. No, it's a problem because he didn't pay his grazing fees. What's he paying his grazing fees for? To save the turtle. Really? The turtles you just killed? We have to address the corruption. Because it's BS after BS to claim these regulatory policies and these grazing fees for nothing. Now, give me a second here. And I don't know if Vince is out there. I think he's supposed to be out there. I'm kind of having a little bit too many issues to try to contact him right this second. But if I can find this clip, I definitely want to play this one clip. Hopefully I can find it here. A lot of you might know Larkin Rose. He gets into a lot of what I talk about. And, you know, when I really started researching it and stuff, I was coming to conclusions, and I came across Larkin Rose when I was looking into Free State Project at one time. And it was just amazing that things I was saying, conclusions I was coming up with, he really had kind of a similar and, basically the same stance. I have one here. Statism is religion, and this was Larkin Rose, on the Tom Woods show. And there's a lot of important information in this, and that's why I want to kind of get into this.
Citizen, you are now departing from the world of
I'm going to try
opinion.
to get a little bit further into this for you guys.
That person toward where you are.
Well, it's funny because a lot of the time I look back to when I was
here it is.
and believed in authority and believed in government and think, what could I say to the old me that would make me think about things? And different approaches work for different people. One of the most common I used is demonstrating that in their daily lives, almost everybody is an anarchist. They go to a store, they don't point a gun at the store owner and say, I need that, you have to give it to me. They say, I'll trade you this money for that stuff. It's only in the realm of politics where they suddenly hallucinate a complete 180 twisting of morality. Where, well now, like, I'm not allowed to rob you myself, but if I vote for somebody to take your money legally and call it taxation and give it to me, somehow that's okay. And that's moral and it's justified because we did this bizarre ritual in between. And I didn't actually do it, I just voted for somebody else to do it. So that's all fine and dandy. And that's what I mean by, the vast majority of people I know personally advocate that I be threatened with violence if I don't fund things they want. Almost none of them would feel okay doing it themselves. So just pointing that out to people, basically, this is whoever I'm talking to, you advocate that I be robbed and caged if I don't pay up for things that you want. Do you think that would be okay if you did it yourself? Nobody says yes. But they think it's okay when it's done in the name of government. And that is what makes it so dangerous. It isn't the evil people. I'm not scared of the Maos and the Stalins and the Hitlers. I'm scared of the thousands or millions of people that hallucinate them to be authority and so do their bidding and pay for their empires and carry out their orders. I don't care if there's one loony with a stupid mustache. He is not a threat if the people do not believe in authority.
So if what you're saying is right, then the key difference in society is not between people who believe in so-called big government and people who believe in limited government. You're saying that that's really just a continuum along the same status line.
Right. It's just that's the spectrum of the mistake. But the solution is all the way off of that spectrum. And I think one of the best, illustrations of that is the best attempt ever at a limited protector government, the U.S. Constitution, created the biggest authoritarian empire in the history of the world. Like, there's a degree, it's sort of like saying, it's the difference between saying, I want a nice slave master who doesn't whip me very hard, who doesn't make me work too long in the fields before he steals the fruits of my labor, and saying, I own myself. I'm not the property of anybody. It's a discrete degree. It's a fundamental step, which is why, to me, totalitarians and minarchists are pretty much on the same side on the one question that matters, which is, can there be such thing as a legitimate ruling class?
Well, and the thing is, it's hard to see there's some questions it's hard to see how the free market, the free society could answer. So in defense of people who believe in limited government, I don't think it's necessarily because, and I don't even think you think it's necessarily because they're people of bad will. It could be that in some cases they're just people of limited imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, I refer to it as the most dangerous superstition. I don't say everybody's evil for thinking this. What's scary is the power that the belief in authority has over good people. You're probably familiar with the Milgram experiments, Stanley Milgram.
I am, but tell the audience.
I talk about it all the time. I'll give a really short version, which is it was basically a psychology test to see to what degree normal people would inflict severe pain, maybe even death, on a complete stranger simply because a perceived authority figure told them to. And the results were 60-some% of Americans will basically kill an innocent stranger if an authority figure tells them to. And it's a great illustration that the problem isn't that these people are malicious and evil. It's that they are raised by their parents, by the school, by the government, by the culture, by all the authoritarian messages built into everything to think that obedience is a virtue. And when you raise the culture to think that, and you get one nasty psycho at the top who says, hey, go do bad stuff, people say, well, I have to follow orders. I have to obey the law. I have to do as I'm told because that's a virtue. And then good people march off and do evil stuff.
There's an interesting
like all of human history.
There's an interesting wrinkle on the Milgram experiments that I only found out recently, which is that he also measured whether or not people would be willing to basically electrocute somebody if just one of their peers told them to do it. Like there's a bunch of them in a room and they've all been instructed to do such and such. If one of them insists, hey, we have to keep doing this because that's what we've been told, people aren't as inclined to follow that person. But when the authority figure tells them to do it, you're right, that's the key thing. We're all trained to believe this. And what's funny about this, of course, is that the same people who will electrocute a stranger because an authority figure tells them to, these are the same people who will laugh their rear ends off at the idea of monarchy. And how could people ever have been so foolish and superstitious to believe in monarchy? Now I'm off to the Obama inauguration,
Right. I used to refer to the belief in government as analogous to a religious faith. I don't anymore. It's not an analogy. It is a religious faith. It has high priests. It's the belief in a superhuman entity that has the right to issue commandments, and if you disobey, it's a sin. And they have all their pseudo-religious rituals and everything with their giant temples and their bizarre rituals and rites that they perform. It really is a religion. It happens to be the most destructive religion in the history of the world, just in terms of body count and everything else. But because so many people still believe it, they don't see it as a belief. They think it's real.
How did the Larkin Rose of this book become the Larkin Rose of this book? Were you a minarchist before? Were you something else before? And then what was the light bulb that went off for you that converted you, so to speak?
I was constitutionalist, libertarian leaning for years and years and years, minarchist. that whole general category. For years and years, and I love to debate. And when I debate, I also love to win. And it's hard to win if you have contradictions inside your own head. So going through this process, and a lot of it was talking to my wife, Tessa. We would discuss things back and forth. And it was just a matter of eliminating inconsistencies. Something as basic as, I could scream at the leftists, you don't have the right to steal my money to give to the poor. But for some odd reason, I have the right to steal your money by way of government to build a military, because it's for your own good. And I noticed, why am I using the exact same arguments they use and pretending it's okay when I do it? So just eliminating the inconsistencies, I fell off the status spectrum and realized, most people, a whole lot of anarchists I know got there by deciding that society would be better without a government than it is with one. I didn't get there that way. I got there by figuring out legitimate government is logically impossible. It cannot exist. So it's I'm not for abolishing Santa Claus. I'm just going around this saying Santa isn't real, and we really ought to act accordingly instead of basing our behaviors on mythology, on something that is provably false and hugely destructive. Luckily, nobody's killing millions of people in the name of Santa. They are killing millions of people in the name of government.
I think there are a lot of objections that somebody on the left might have to what you're saying. That person might say, well, without government, the economy will be dominated by monopolies, the poor will be treated like serfs, and et cetera, et cetera. Like we're sort of familiar with those. Then on the other side, with the minarchists, let's say, who would agree with you that we don't need government programs to protect us from monopoly or to help the poor and all this and that. But they will say, we do need some kind of umpire in society. We do need some sort of law enforcement mechanism because human beings do have an inclination to do wicked things from time to time.
Right, and that's something I hear all the time and address constantly. And my first question is, what species is this umpire going to be? Because so far, I've never seen a wise aardvark run for office. Not only are they just human beings, the human beings we're supposed to be scared of and distrustful of, but they're the worst human beings around. If you ask people, well, are politicians better than us? Well, no, they're lying crooks. Okay, so the solution to the imperfections of man is to take some of the worst people around and give them permission to violently dominate the rest of us. That's a really bad solution. And some people assume that, well, you must trust everybody if you don't want government. That's not at all true. I don't nearly trust everybody, but if I don't trust people to run their own lives, why on earth would I trust them to be in a position of power where they can forcibly run other people's lives?
I saw you at one point, whether it was on Facebook, it might have been on Facebook, because I think you just joined Facebook, and you were saying that it would be nice to have a debate with a statist because, it's interesting intellectual exercise and you can spread ideas this way, but you found that the ones who actually do debate, whether it's Facebook or wherever, are really not giving rise to the most fulfilling debates. So I thought in our remaining time, I will satisfy this desire of yours, right? I mean, I am like a Santa Claus on the Tom Woods Show here. I'm the host. I'm the audio engineer. I do everything. So I'm going to throw some objections at you as if I'm a statist, and we'll just see how it goes. Now, I'm not going to give you easy ones, like what would happen to the poor. Like for us, that's an easy one. For most people, I suppose that would be hard. That's an easy one. I want to give you a tough one. So I'm going to ask you this. Right now, today, the year 2014 in the United States, I enjoy, and I don't just mean me, I mean really all Americans enjoy a standard of living that the greatest kings of Europe could not have imagined. I enjoy, for the most part, a peaceful life. I don't have to worry about armed gangs accosting me. I don't have to worry about the sorts of things that did afflict a lot of people during the days of serfdom, and bandits would run around and the Vikings would invade. I don't have to worry about those things. So yes, it's true, the government is obnoxious and it loots me and it regulates and it does all kinds of terrible things. But it also has created an atmosphere in which I can live a reasonably peaceful life. Now, it's true that Lark and Rose may have an improvement, But would I be willing to risk this comfortable life for the prospect of an improvement when the risk is I could lose everything I have and fall into chaos?
Well, there are two ways to answer that. One is with the economic explanation of why more freedom equals more prosperity. I don't usually go that route just because it's easy for people to make random predictions. If we didn't have government, it's the end of the world. I prefer the other route of saying, in this relatively comfortable life where, yes, you and I are richer than most of the kings in history in terms of what we can have and the comforts and luxuries, just like, a house slave had it better than the other slaves and could actually have a comfortable, relatively easy life. There's the slight problem that while you're having your comfortable, easy life, you are paying for innocent people to be caged and for innocent people to be blown up and extorted and controlled and robbed by way of inflation and by way of taxation and by way of all the ways in which government initiates violence against innocent people. That's happening because you're paying for it. And every empire, and you know this full well, governments don't produce anything. They're complete parasites. All the wealth they have, all the tanks they have and the bombs and the agents and the guns, they didn't produce any of that. They taxed people who handed over their money, and the productive people bought the tools of evil that the state uses. I don't want to be comfortable sitting around knowing I am buying the tools and paying the salaries of the fascists out there who are hurting innocent people. That's not okay with me. If my choice was to be poor and not do that, I would rather be poor and not do that than be rich. As it happens, the choices are actually be rich and not fund evil, or be slightly less rich and fund evil.
Now, of course, the common objection would be that you would get a bunch of warlords fighting all the time. You'd get defense agencies fighting with each other all the time. And, of course, it is hard to anticipate how services like defense and courts and so on would be provided in the absence of government. But my next objection as a statist would be that there really are not a whole lot of examples of this in history. I mean, yeah, you could dig up medieval Iceland and societies that are so far removed from ours that they may as well not even have existed as examples. But you're telling me I'm supposed to give up my comfortable life in exchange for a system dreamed up by a philosopher somewhere?
Actually, it's give up your comfortable life and have a more comfortable life in the name of letting go of a giant lie dreamed up by parasites. Because this isn't some new thing that people need to learn. It's one lie, one superstition they need to let go of, which is the belief in authority and government. And the thing is, when people predict all the bad things that would happen if we don't have government, it's most of what needs to happen is just clarifying what disappears when the belief in authority disappears. No resources disappear. No know-how disappears. People don't disappear. The stuff doesn't disappear. The technology doesn't disappear. The one thing that disappears is the belief that certain people have an exemption from morality. And that is all. That's all that disappears when authority vanishes, is the idea that, well, those people, because of elections and constitutions and legislation, they're allowed to steal and call it taxes. They're allowed to initiate violence and call it legislation. So when people say, but without government, blah, 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 what they're really saying is, but if we don't give some people permission to commit evil, how will this and this and this work? And just understanding that that's really the question makes the question seem as insane as it is. How on earth would anything be improved by giving some people permission to commit evil? We can still organize, we can still cooperate, we can still do all of the positive voluntary things that people should do. The only thing that disappears is the apparent legitimacy of violent coercion in the name of a mythical authority. That's all that gets erased from the equation, is stop pretending some people have an exemption from right and wrong.
But I think the response that I, as the statist, will make here is that I'm willing to go with you 95% of the way. I think you're absolutely right about the parasitic nature of government. But on the other hand, as bad as government is, governments have only used nuclear weapons twice on people. Whereas you're envisioning a world in which the proliferation of nuclear weapons would just be unstoppable. It would be anybody could get a nuclear weapon. And yeah, maybe that person wouldn't be able to get insurance, liability insurance, if he's wielding nuclear weapons, but some crazy people would be willing to take that sort of chance. I'm not sure I'm willing to take that sort of chance.
Well, now we're wandering into sort of guessing what would happen. Why would anybody want to spend $1 gajillion on a nuclear weapon when it's completely worthless in a stateless society for coercing anyone? Like, you can kill lots of people. Like, yeah, you can now. And right now, government is the one killing lots of people. But it doesn't, the only reason war machines and nuclear warheads, that there's an incentive for anyone to do that is because there are these giant human livestock farms known as countries that people want control of. Well, I'm going to threaten you with this, and it's basically slave masters battling over who gets to own this piece of dirt and the slaves on it. But if there isn't government and people aren't imagining that to be legitimate, first of all, the first guy who says, I have a nuclear weapon, and if you don't blah, 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 he dies. There will be a big sale to raise a bounty to blow his head off. He just threatened murder. We're going to take him out. And it's curious how that never happens because governments have an open standing agreement that we won't kill the guy at the top. We'll kill your pawns by the millions because that's the game we play. But us tyrants, we'll leave each other alone. Everyone.
Now, I want you to think about that for a second. You know, he brings up the point, well, you know, in a stateless society, most people be like, let's put a bounty out for this guy that has a nuclear weapon that's threatening people. You know, look at it now. If a country threatens the U.S., what do we see? We're going to put sanctions on them. Kind of like North Korea, because those sanctions really hurt the North Korean government. Hold on, no it didn't. It hurt the North Korean people. It has not phased the North Korean government. It's actually probably in all bolstered the government because now you have people that are basically having to beg for everything they get. So, you know, let's just point out that fact and, you know, how that plays into, you know, life today. We don't go after the guy that's threatening. What we end up doing is putting sanctions and regulations on, you know, trade with these places that end up hurting the people, not the government that's threatening you. So, you know, sanctions are not anything to be like, oh yeah, sanctions, good job, put sanctions on that country. Those people are going to be more, you know, needing their government to give them things now. Oh, we'll make the people so their lives so crappy through sanctions that they'll rise up against their own government. Usually doesn't happen because usually those people end up starving. Definitely in countries that have relied on importation. Somewhere that the U.S. is headed right now, that we're shutting down areas that either raise livestock, bunny ranch, or out in California where complete, you know, farmland has been shut down for some fish. People are like, well, you know, you gotta save the fish, and those are public lands, he didn't pay his grazing fees. This is more than that. And, if you look at the big scope of things, you could understand that this is way more than that. They're putting us in a position where now we're importing more and more food from outside the country. And then you look at some of the crazy stuff going on in some of these countries that we import food from, talking about turning sewage into food and sewage into drinking water, and now we're kind of adopting some of that stuff. And we're importing from countries that are playing with test tube food. And then now we're putting ourselves in a position that, if they slap sanctions on us, if this keeps going down the same road that it's going, that if we start importing most of our food, which I think we're pretty close or over that, but let's say, 75%, 80% of our food's imported. Meat and all. And you go, now they slap sanctions on the U.S. because, the U.S. has been using drones in countries without authorization from those countries or the United Nations, which they're investigating. Let's slap sanctions on the U.S. You think that's going to hurt the elite in the U.S.? You think that's going to hurt the government of the U.S.? Who's that going to hurt? Well, it's not going to hurt me, Josh. I got my own livestock where I can hunt. No, you won't be able to. That'll be seized from you. Again, the government's not going to hurt from it. You are. People are like, that'll piss off no, it's not going to piss off the Americans to the point that they're going to rise up against the government. Look at sanctions in other countries. What does it actually do? It causes those people to go stand in bread lines, to obey government for food. See where this heads? We're going down a slippery slope. And, I'm with Larkin on my ideology. There might be a few things that we disagree about, but I think I like him for the simple fact that he's come to the place he is in his ideology the same way I came to the place I am. It trying to win arguments and going, hold on. And he made the analogy about, you say, you can't steal from one person to pay for what you want, but we can steal from, people to pay for wars. That's okay though. And that was hypocritical. And I had the same conflict, way back. And that was one of my first really, going to say, hey, war is not good at all. It does no beneficial thing. Definitely when it's wars of offensive actions. And then you look into a lot of the reason wars were started, and war is not good. So I've come to the same type of conclusions with my ideology that, he has. And I think there's a lot of great points that he points out in that. I'm kind of working on something based off of my beliefs, my ideology, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do an article, see how much I get done and, what this turns out to be. Who knows? It might be a book. But I'm going to play a little bit more of this. And there's not much left. So here we go.
Well, one will get out of line enough to get nasty, but most people just kill pawns. But that game doesn't work if people don't believe in authority. Even if somebody said, I have a nuke, I can blow up North America, people would say, well, since you just said that, we see you as an obvious threat. You just threatened mass murder, and we're going to come get you. We're not going to vote. We're not going to beg for your legislative permission to not get nuked. We're going to deal with you as what you are, which is a violent threat to us, and take you out. That's the end. I think assassination is the best form of large-scale defense against authoritarian empires. Kill the guy at the top. Don't kill a million of his pawns.
Well, let's think let's think for a minute about somebody who commits murder on a smaller scale. Let's think about a serial killer. How in your society can we go after a serial killer without the concept of authority? In other words, if I am entitled to take this dangerous person and confine him somewhere or physically remove him from society, if you're not going to call me an authority figure, then what would you call me?
A human being. See, that's the thing. Everybody still has the right of self-defense. And each person, instead of thinking, what can I vote for, would think, all right, what do I personally feel justified in doing here? And whatever you did, you couldn't use the excuse of, I'm just following orders, because there isn't orders. I'm just enforcing the law. There aren't legislators. What you do, everyone sees it, and everyone knows that you are responsible for it. And you know that you're responsible for it. As opposed to cops today who will kick down somebody's door and point a machine gun in their face because they have the wrong plant and say, well, this wasn't my idea. I'm not really doing this. A strange thing called the law is doing this, and I'm not to blame. So it's not a guarantee that the right thing happens every time. Nothing guarantees that. But it is a guarantee that when people act, they will be seen by everyone around them as responsible for their actions. And the discomfort of voluntarism is that it puts responsibility on people. Like, suppose we caught a serial killer. Suppose, for this example, everybody knows he did it. We totally found him, chowing down on one of his neighbor's corpses. Okay, what do we do about it? And then we sit down and say, what do we, as just people, no badges, no legislation, we're just people, what do we feel justified in doing about this? As scary as the uncertainty of that may be, the outcome will always be better than, let's call an authority who imagines that he has the right to do anything and bears no responsibility for his actions.
Larkin, tell everybody your website and what they can expect to find there.
The website is larkenrose.com, which is LARKENROSE.com. And my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, is there. So is my novel, The Iron Web, and a zillion articles. And I have a YouTube channel that's just youtube.com/LarkenRose with tons and tons of stuff there. A lot of it approaching similar concepts in different directions that make people go, I never quite thought of it like that. So it's really, what I'm trying to do is nudge people into realizing that every single, here, this will be offensive to people, every single person who believes in government still has a contradiction inside his own head. It's inherent in authoritarianism. And the reason I left it is because I realized I cannot even be consistent with myself and believe in government.
Well,
that's basically the message of almost everything I do.
As I say, your followers are just sing the praises of your book, and I didn't know about your novel, so I'll take a look at that. But to think of government as a great superstition is a very, very interesting idea. No doubt there'll be listeners who say, well, these ideas are very undeveloped. We need further information. Well, of course, that's why you wrote a book, right? I mean, you can't answer everything in a 25-minute conversation. But I hope people will check out larkenrose.com, and maybe we can talk again in the future sometime.
That'd be great.
All right, thanks again. All right, everybody, a couple quick things.
Okay, that was Larkin Rose on Tom Wood's show. So these are things that you really, if you say you believe in liberty, if you say you believe in freedom, but then you can say that that government in a certain form is legitimate. I don't think you really truly have a grasp on what liberty is, what freedom is, and you see a lot of that, and I've dealt with a lot of it, within myself, going through this, really finding out what is my belief, what is my ideology, what do I feel that is what I should live by, what I believe in. And yeah, it kind of is anarchist, and people look at that as a bad thing, but it's not about no rules, it's about no rulers. It's a concept that another flawed human being does not have some supernatural moral ability to rule over another imperfect human being. That's why I say that government is an outdated concept. It's an outdated idea. Because if we are truly evolutionized in our way of thinking, you cannot have part of you that goes, people should be free, we should have liberty, and then go, but government in a certain form is legitimate. Because that's a contradiction. You can't have liberty and freedom with government. And people go, well, I thought you said that you can side with constitutionalists. And I'm like, yeah, I can side with that we have to move in the opposite direction that we are now. But because of my beliefs, I don't see anybody that I could ever vote for. Because in my beliefs, the only people I could vote for are people that would say that I would take this office to do nothing more than to scale it back completely, to take its authority away from it. And who runs for office to say, I want to get this position, I want to become president to take any of the president's authority away? Who do you see running for office that says, I want to become president to make the president basically, useless? Who runs for Congress that says, well, I want to make Congress basically useless in enacting laws or enforcing regulation or passing regulation or, the numerous BS that they do? They don't run for these positions to not use the power that these positions hold. They just don't do it. And you go, well, Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. Yes, they will scale back. I agree with that scaling back, but not in the way you would want them to scale back. Because at the same time they're scaling back on, using their right hand, and their left hand, they're passing laws and passing regulation basically that limit the abilities of others. They do. Because they still believe in the moral authority for one flawed human to be able to rule, regulate, and have authority over another flawed human being. That somehow that's morally acceptable. If you hold that belief, then you are contradicting what you say you believe in freedom. The reason behind that. Again, Larkin brought up the point, can't say that, well, we shouldn't take from someone to pay for their welfare or what they want, and then turn around and go, but it's okay to take from someone and pay for our military and our wars. Can't say that we shouldn't pay for take money and pay for people's, housing, and then turn around and go, but we can't take from people and have armed bureaucrats go kick them off land that they've been managing, not the BLM, for over 100 years. Their family has. So there's a lot of contradictions with a lot of these people that claim to be liberty lovers. And one of the biggest people, I really hate naming names, but I have to just call this out, is Glenn Beck. And, you know, when I listen to him and then listen to him cover certain things, I do believe he's a little egotistical. Basically, when I heard him going off Monday, because, well, we only have one actual broadcast airwave talk radio here, and I didn't have my phone on me. But he was talking about the Bundy Ranch, and he was contradicting his beliefs because of certain little issues with the Bundy Ranch that he believed might not be right. But when I was listening to him, first thing I thought is, I was him. He's a lot older than me, but I was him years ago. I was. Because I was the one going, liberty, freedom, and then go, but in this instance, that guy should have to pay his taxes. Or in this instance, it's like, hold on, what the hell am I saying? It's okay to take from one person for this goal, but not for the other goal. Well, what gives me that authority? And, you know, Larkin's exactly right. It's because you have a belief basically like a religion when it comes to government and authority. You were taught from a young age that people can have authority over you. And you're taught from a young age, people not even related to you when you're young, just strangers to you, just one day, all of a sudden, have full authority over you. And now, if you look at public schools, you can be a teenager, your parents can be objective, but now the state still has authority over you. Now the parents don't have to give permission to anybody to have authority over you. They are forced into allowing others to have authority over you with the threat of having armed agents show up at their door. And some states, some areas worse than others, some still homeschool friendly for the most part. Some states not homeschool friendly. If you're homeschooling, you're suspicious for the rest of your life. Your kids are looked at suspiciously because they weren't propagandized by the public school system or the private school systems. Even private schools are kind of harped on. They're teaching religion. Well, that's their belief. They have the right. You don't have to go there. And I've known kids that have left private school, even though their parents wanted them to go, and said, no, I'm just not going. I don't believe in that religion. That's their choice. Homeschooling, I think, is the best way. I get tired of watching people claim to want freedom. But in just instances, it's okay that freedom doesn't exist. Because somehow, it's okay for this government that the only authority it has is the authority you allow it to have, can go, well, I'm not going to produce anything. I'm not going to manage anything, but I'm going to charge you for the fees to do it. And then on top of it, you have to manage it yourself because we don't do anything. We don't produce. And all those things that the Bundys managed for hundreds of years was destroyed by BLM agents. Water lines, wells, windmills. Oh yeah, saving the desert tortoise by cutting off water supplies that I'm sure a lot of animals do flock to. Usually, if there's a water oasis somewhere, they flock to it. That's kind of just known fact. So, not only, did this affect the cow's ability to seek water, I'm sure hundreds of years of a cistern and water being brought up out of the earth for this wildlife, and these wildlife creatures are going to show up to their normal watering hole that they've been coming to, and their little creature ancestors have been coming to. That's now gone. No, that won't affect. Great job, BLM. Government isn't productive. It's destructive. And I think that this is a concept that more people need to understand. And please show me where government has been productive. Because every time someone has, I've been able to shoot it down. To show how it wasn't government. It was a necessity that the public wanted. The government always likes to shove its way in and go, we're taking credit for this. We're doing it. Just like, the little town that, I don't know if it was a town or where it was. I don't have the article here, but, the community came together and paid to have a road fixed. Well, the local government didn't get a claim that it was them that did this. The government didn't provide the road, therefore we should have to tear it up and then pay the government twice as much to have them come and redo it. That way it can be a government road. And an instance where that didn't happen down in New Orleans is local community and people bought their street from the New Orleans, made it a private road, and took care of it. So it does happen. Okay, what time is it? Wow, we are coming up to the end of the broadcast. There's so many issues when it comes to regulations. Who's going to stop the pollution if we don't regulate these big companies? Well, who stops the pollution when you have government there to regulate these type of companies? Fukushima, anyone? Look at the state of a lot of our nuclear facilities around the country here in the United States. Look that they have a lot of nuclear plants on fault lines. We don't see all these government regulations and government oversight doing anything to help, do we? Doesn't seem to happen. So what's the alternative without government? Well, let me ask you this. If you have a government agency protecting these big corporations, would they have it so easy when it comes to pollution in a community? Would they have it so easy to take land from someone to profit off of it? Would they have it easy to prevent you access? Without government, the communities could look out for themselves a lot better. Think about it. I'll see you guys Friday. Stay tuned. Coming up next here on Friday, in the Martin.